As you know, the MDI Biolab has often really tried to shine a spotlight on the connections between art and science. And tonight I am really excited to be able to share with you a wonderful story or a wonderful example of art and science and storytelling. And I think it's just a fantastic package that has all the features. So before I do that, I want to just tell you a little bit about our speakers tonight. I think probably many of you are familiar with them, but for those of you who don't know, Kate Dickerson is the founder and director of the Maine Science Foundation. And you know, what's not in her resume is I think she is probably the biggest champion of science in the state of Maine. She is like the Energizer Bunny and has done so much to really promote all of the fantastic work that's happening around the state, and does it in a way that makes it just incredibly exciting and approachable to the general public. So I just want to give her a huge shout out for all the hard work that she does to really try and get people excited about what's happening in science around the state of Maine, and how, you know, what wonderful careers are available to young people who might be interested in science. So I'm a fan if you if you didn't get that. And I just really appreciate all the work that she does. She also has a fantastic podcast that's a lot of fun, lots of different folks featured, but different types of work and science going on around the state. So with that, let me just tell you a little bit. Kate has spent most of her career sort of in the energy and environment field. She has focused on environmental policy, on pollution prevention, environmental cleanup. So she comes to this conversation with that background, and I think is particularly relevant for our subject this evening, which centers around climate change. And you know, whether or not there is a way to sort of shine perhaps a slightly different lens on climate change on that issue. And she and Lucas Richmond, who is the musical director of the Bangor Symphony Orchestra, have chosen to do that in what I think is a rather unique way. So we've brought them together this evening to share their process about how they have collaborated on creating a beautiful piece of music to really help folks appreciate the situation that we're in terms of a changing climate. And so without further ado, I just want to welcome Kate to our Science Cafe stage, and I hope all of you will give her a warm welcome, and Lucas as well, who is doing much of this amazing creative work behind this process. So we look forward to hearing from both of them, and then we'll open it up to questions. I'm sure all of you will have lots of great questions for them. So welcome, Kate. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jerry. It's always great to talk to you and have a new ad, like bullet, I can put on my resume. So Energizer Bunny, I will happily add. I look at my role here as much of what I did for and to Lucas, which is to introduce the idea and the concept of this project, and then pass it off to him for the heavy lifting. So a very quick overview. The Maine Science Festival was launched in 2015. And like Jerry said, it's a celebration of the science that happens in Maine. As someone who had the great good fortune to move here, and so I had a lot of experience in other places, I was gobsmacked when I discovered all of the really remarkable science that happens in this state, and hearing people say, well, it's too bad people can't stay here and live here and work here because we just don't do that here. So after hearing that for a while, and you know, inevitably reading an article in the New York Times about science festivals, two and two went together, and I thought, well, I should just start a science festival for no good reason. I have no skills in that area. But anyway, that's where it came from. Jerry was one of the first people I literally cold called, said, I had this really crazy idea. Can I talk to you about this? And she said, yeah, it's not so crazy. So go ahead and do it. So that started in 2015. Pre-pandemic, we grew from 2.5 days to 5 days of events, with 70 events and activities produced over those 5 days. And our audience is everyone, which is limiting when sponsors and other people want to know exactly who they can talk to. But we have broken that down into 4 fields, all of whom have, I think, a direct connection to who we're also trying to reach with this piece. So the 4 areas are students, kids, kids probably about middle school and up, so that they know that what they're learning in school makes sense and why it's important. We have science enthusiasts who just the opportunity to give them a chance to be around their people is an enthusiastic reason enough right there. We have Families, so kids who drag their parents there. The one thing I neglected to mention is that we hold this festival in March. We do that because it's the world's longest month. Everybody in Maine is tired of each other. And most importantly, it sends a message that this is a festival for Mainers. As much as I would love to take money from out-of-staters, any chance I can get, I really wanted this festival to be about and for Maine. And then the other audience is the general public. So that's the big, broad background. One of the key functions of the Maine Science Festival has always been to have arts organizations as a critical component. There's a whole lot of reasons for that. The personal reason for me is I have a theater kid and I have a math kid, and in my fantasy world, they have to collaborate together and work on a project. Will likely never happen, but if I can kind of hit both of them with this festival, maybe we can do it. The other reason is, as a longtime artistic director, Barry Newport, said to me years ago, artists and scientists are trying to get to the same answers. They're getting at the truth, they just do it differently. And I know, as someone who is a huge science advocate, that I also adore the arts, but I don't know how they work. Like I don't know how, Lucas has heard me say this many times, I don't know how he does what he does. I'm completely, it just boggles my mind. So, but I also know we can reach people with science if we incorporate the arts into it. So we've had a long-standing partnership with Penobscot Theater Company, individual artists, and Bangor Symphony Orchestra. Here's where where we finally get to this project. Lucas and Brian Heinrichs, who's the executive director of the Bangor Symphony Orchestra, and I had been talking for at least 2 or 3 years. How can we do a big project together? How can we do something besides just the science of stringed instruments, which is cool. Don't get me wrong. That was a really cool session. A lot of physics, so my husband was happy, but how can we do a larger project? And kind of all of these things coalesced in 2015 or 2016, I believe it was. Researchers led by Andy Pershing at the Gulf of Maine Research Institute realized that the Gulf of Maine was warming faster than 99% of the world's oceans. And there have been people at the University of Maine who have backed that up, and further studies about that. Maine is also the home, in many ways, I would argue, to the leading climate change researchers in the world. There are people who, this is a little bit of inside baseball, but there are people who have given up tenure and restarted their tenure track so they could come to the University of Maine at the Maine Climate Change Institute. That is almost unheard of for people to do that in that world. And then Maine's bicentennial was coming up in 2020. So all of those came around as this opportunity to really focus on what we call at the Science Festival a headliner event, which is the only event out of the 70 plus that we charge tickets for. It's the only one that we allow people who don't do their work in Maine to come and present to Mainers. And this one with the bicentennial was going to be all Maine all the time. So, that was the easy part for me. Lucas, for reasons I'm not entirely sure, said, sure, I'll write a piece about climate change. What do we do? So I said, well, okay, so I have a great idea. How about we go on a deep dive, what is effectively, we realized later, a master's level curriculum on learning about climate change in the Gulf of Maine from the people who are dealing with it and studying it and searching it right now. So for the better part of 2.5 months, I took Lucas all around the state, and he met with just extraordinary people, friends of Casco Bay, Gulf of Maine Research Institute, Maine Coast Heritage Trust, Maine Center for Coastal Fisheries, the town of Stonington town manager, UMaine climate scientists. I feel like I'm forgetting someone, which would be a shame, but I will include them after. And all of these people, and Bigelow Laboratory, where we met with 4 different researchers. All of these people gave us an extraordinary amount of their time and knowledge. And actually, they gave it to Lucas. And, again, people who didn't necessarily individually have a relationship with the festival, but understood what we were trying to do. And they all explained to Lucas their work. So what I'm going to do right now is just show the very beginnings of a video we've put together that gives a good overview of what Lucas learned from my perspective, or what was conveyed in those interviews. And then I'm going to pass the baton, and he's going to explain how he did the actual really hard part of this project. And I'll also, Lucas, I'll let you explain the student part as well once we get to that. So.
the temperature in the Gulf of Maine is changing at a rate more than 99% of the global oceans. That's 99%. That's insane. I mean, we are like, sort of a hot spot.
Climate change isn't something that's happening out there or happening in the future. It's happening right here. It's happening right literally at our feet.
Yeah.
We can see in the bay what's happening.
Standing here today, you wouldn't know that we're in a spot that's going to be the shoreline in 30 years. It feels like we're in the middle of the woods.
Gosh, there's a massive grief process that needs to happen for human beings.
Right.
Not only that this is happening, but the idea that it's happened at our hand.
Because eventually we're going to end up having to move the fire station because it's right in the flood zone.
Oh, wow.
And you can't have that.
Obviously.
So, I mean, I've got a lot on my plate here.
Climate change at a macro level, there's sort of two camps, how to mitigate climate change and keep it from happening or slow it down. And there's adaptation.
They do whatever they need to do in order to get by, but fishermen, it's something, as my husband says, it's in my blood.
The Gulf of Maine has been warming in conjunction with a larger scale warming of the North Atlantic Ocean. So that will have a dramatic impact, and is already starting to have a dramatic impact on the aquatic life.
Just like if I were a lobster, to me it would be very stressful, chaotic, sort of frenetic, a little bit heart racing, and so because these are all really stressful conditions.
This little orb, it's spinning around, it's going around the sun. It has this tiny, tiny, thin little atmosphere around it, and we've messed with that chemistry, right? And so there's a lot to be thinking about what we're losing in all of that. And yet there are lots of people on the planet. There's an awful lot that we can do if enough of us decide to do it. And it doesn't have to be everybody, but we've got to do something. We've got to do.
Is a fairly good overview of the paces that we put Lucas through, and that wasn't everybody that he met with. And I'm going to hand it off to him to talk about how he picked up the process from there.
So, hello to everyone, and thank you so much for being with us. I am originally from Los Angeles, and there are, living in LA, there are a whole host of things that we get used to as Angelinos that have nothing to do with the Eastern Seaboard. So this truly was an education on so many levels for me, not only learning more about the science of climate change, but how it has affected the various ecosystems under the surface of, deep in the ocean. And what was fascinating to me, among many other things, was that each of the specialists with whom we met had felt like their specialty was the most important thing about getting to the root of what needs to be fixed and this and that. And they were all brilliant and so giving, and I'm so grateful for their willingness to meet with me, because why would they meet with this musician guy to write a piece? But to a one, when we were done with the interview, they would always ask, so what are you going to do? How are you going to turn this into music? I'm so eager to find out. One of the things that I did learn in the process of all this is that scientists, as brilliant as they are not great at marketing. And all of the advances that have been made in science are, they're on to their next project, but not necessarily trying to get the word out about the incredible thing that has been accomplished. So the goal with something like this, a piece like this, is to help facilitate the conversations that need to be had, and to open people's eyes in a way that scientists are not necessarily trained to do. For instance, one of the things that I learned, and you can, with a show of hands on your whatever, however you like, this is a question that I I learned, I asked kind of a straw poll, how many people think that the ozone layer is in worse shape than it was 30 years ago? And how many of you feel that the ozone layer is better now than it was 30 years ago? So what I didn't know is that in 1987, 151 nations signed on to an agreement, the Montreal Protocol, to eliminate fluorocarbons from the atmosphere. So in fact, the ozone layer has been 75% restored. I think that that's a great message that hasn't been widely dispersed. I'm a reasonably intelligent person, I like to think, well-informed, and yet I didn't get the message. I didn't know. So if a great message of nations coming together to fix things, if that message hasn't gotten out from something that happened back in 1987, how can we possibly get the message out about how we can all really truly affect change on a global level about climate change? So meeting with all these scientists was truly eye-opening. And I came away with great information, and also even more weight on my shoulders of, oh my goodness, what am I going to do with all this? Once I learned about the 11,000 species of plankton and coccolithophores and copepods and the acidification of lobsters and the right whales and the this and that, I mean, oh my goodness. Truly extraordinary, and all of this information will be we will put it together in some a kind of a comprehensive curriculum that will accompany the piece, because it's all very important. One of the things that so in constructing a piece, with any piece, no matter what it is themed on, I will take elements of the ideas and stitch them together. They become the fabric, the thread for the fabric, as I'm putting the piece together. So there was the science. We also met with several middle school classes, and I told the classes about the piece that I was writing, and got their ideas, like, what sounds do you think of when you think of the ocean? And they immediately said the foghorn and seagulls and boat motors and things like that. And that was wonderful, because of course those are the sounds that I want to be able to put into the piece. But I also asked, at the end of this piece, what is the feeling that you would like to come away with? What emotion would you like to feel? And by and large, they all said hope. And that was wonderful. And it was very touching, because of course, we all want to have hope. Without hope, we're lost. And there is hope. But the hope must be informed by truth. And that idea of hope begins with truth was the prevailing underlying message that starts the piece and ends the piece. As we were unable to have the world premiere due to the pandemic in March of 2020, we were able to put together a video of the last 4 minutes or so of the piece, and the anthem that the children's choir sings with orchestras. The piece is written for children's choir. We have this message that they sing to the adults in the room, the world at large, and they say, have you told them? Have you told your children the truth? Things are changing. Things will not remain as they were. I found it incredibly compelling to be able to have the kids say this, to the people who are supposed to be taking care of their future. The kids don't have the wherewithal to take care of their own future. It is up to us to do something. So what better group but the kids to be able to say, hey, guys, wake up, you got to do something. That melodic idea, have you told them? Have you told your children the truth? Ba bum bum bum. Those 4 notes became the melodic motif that it runs throughout the piece. Now, taking the science, I took with Sean Burkle at the University of Maine, the climatologist, Maine state climatologist, is that right? Sean provided me with the temperatures that for the Gulf of Maine over the last 200 years. As we were going to be doing this for the bicentennial of Maine, I wanted 200 years worth of readings. And this is, let me show you here. This is what I got. So these are the readings. Actually, these are the readings, I should say. And now 2 years later, I got to tell you, it's a mystery as to what these mean. But these are the deviations of the temperature. Here is the temperature in Fahrenheit and then in centigrade. And I had what do I do? How do I translate temperature to pitch? At one point I was thinking, well, there's what pitch is it when you're boiling water? Is that a particular pitch? And can we map it out from there? I ended up finding that the pitches, the temperatures that I was given only spanned a very small amount. It was 7 degrees, between 45 and 52 degrees. So I broke that down in the chromatic scale meaning that between each octave from a C to the next C, you're going to have 12 pitches between the white notes and black notes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And that way I could designate a pitch per temperature. And in the year 1820, the temperature was 47 degrees, 0.696, and that pitch is A3. In the body of the piece, the warming C, there are 200 measures that are, it's 1820 through 2020. And each bar has the pitch related to the temperature. That's just one element. We also had the idea that, so I actually, you know what, let's see where we were in, before I go away from that. Let's see where we were when I was born in 1964, it was a B2 year. Here we are. And in 2019, we didn't have actually the temperature for 2020 yet, because we hadn't gone through the whole year yet, but we were at A6. What this means, A6, C, if you know a piano, C4 is middle C. So once you start going in upper octaves, it's an octave higher, and C1 is going to be way, way, way low. But this way, as the piece progresses, you'll notice that we are in the higher octaves. We start off in the low region. Some of these years, 1835 is very, very low. But as the piece goes on, the pitches get higher and higher. You see more 3s and 4s and 5s, and then we get into the 6s and 7s, and oh my goodness, we do get into A8, 2012. It was a hot year. That's the highest temperature that we had measured. In each of those years, there are also some significant events. For instance, 1938 was the introduction of the first paper on climate change. Astounding, back in 1938. So the year 1938 in the piece, there's a significant thing that happens musically. Also the introduction of the foghorn. Let me bring up, so you see in the music, let me just get to that. This is a, I'll just share with you this is the vocal score, the piano vocal score. And here's the foghorn. And that's actually, forgive me, I don't have the year designated when that happens. I have to go to the full score. But the elements of this rocking sea come in when the kids sing this music. You see how this goes. Have you told them? Have you told your children the truth? And if you notice, this truth, hope begins with truth. So these notes are designated, they come out of this little idea of truth, hope. Bum, 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 ba. If we go back to the beginning, do, do, di, do, di, do, di, do, di, do, di, do. When you play that really fast, it starts having the semblance of waves rolling. Do, do, di, do, do, di, do, di, do, di, do, di, do, do, di, do, do. So that's how I use the motive of how you have you told them in that sort of context. The children sing this anthem at the end, and I think we're not going to watch the video, but we can put up the link to the YouTube video so everybody can watch that after the talk to see the last portion of this piece. It was incredible to have musicians of the Bangor Symphony as well as singers from all over the country recording their portion, and it was all edited together so we hear this portion of the piece. There are two parts of the children's chorus, that's sopranos, children's chorus, children's choir soprano, children's choir alto. And there's also the women's chorus. The women's chorus, I decided to cast as the sirens. Now, if you know the Greek legend of the sirens who sing their song and woo lure the sailors to their death on the rocks. In this case, though, I wanted the sirens to be climate change deniers. And if we listen to their song, we die. So I wrote a poem that that takes that idea, and let me find it's up here. Just 1 second, sorry. So let me share this. Can you see that okay? Might be seeing my Zoom as well, I'm not sure.
No, you're good, Lucas, that's perfect.
Okay, so hear our song and follow. Come join us on the shore, where hope is dashed upon the rocks and truth is nevermore. Let yourself be carried by waves of false beliefs as skeletons of scientists are buried under reefs. Deeply breathe our perfume of ignorance and lies. Taste with us the ashes of knowledge as it dies. So the whole idea is this kind of well, just don't worry about anything. Science doesn't matter. Listen to our song. And because the sirens come from a Greek legend, I had a friend translate this poem into Greek. So the women sing in Greek, and this is the Greek original, and they sing akuste to traudimas, kelas din akti mazimas, opui il pida, stus vrachus panvetipa, and etc., etc. No, I don't speak Greek, but I was given a lesson in the pronunciation. So that, I think I need to reshare in order to get to the music. So the women sing in Greek this anthem. And here they are. Let me make this a little smaller. And here you see, and then they have this, this siren kind of motive. There are so many different ideas in this piece that come together to create the warming sea. I know I've missed various things. Oh, here's 1938, by the way. This is bar 1938. That's the music that's happening there. So I've talked quite a bit, and I'm sure there might be some questions. So maybe we'll open up the floor to some questions.
Lucas, thank you so much. And Kate, you as well for the introduction. I think it's clear that the two of you have sparked something pretty amazing and pretty unique. And so just start by telling us when the actual debut of this piece will be and where and how we might listen and enjoy.
I'll take this one for no good reason. Just so it's part of the main science festival, which will be in March 2022. So get your vaccines, encourage people to get their vaccines so we can all get together. It will be at the Collins Center of the Arts on March 19th at 7 p.m. And it's a whole evening of climate change. We're going to start with a conversation with some of Maine's climate change experts from the Climate Change Institute. That will actually be moderated by Ronit Brouwer, who is a science diplomat from the UK who we've been working with on this project. So in addition to being a Maine homegrown project, we also have an international aspect to this because they also have been working in all sorts of different ways to address climate change. So we thought that this would be a good match. Then we're gonna have a short film of similar to what we showed before of Lucas and his journey. And then the world premiere of this piece. And then kind of the sweet sauce. That's not true. The sweet sauce is the piece. So like that's it. But we're going to have after that what I'm calling a talk back, where we're going to hear directly from most of the people that Lucas interviewed, their immediate reactions of the piece, and then their thoughts and examples of what we can do next. Because I think the one thing that Lucas and I have agreed upon wholeheartedly, and I will speak for you, Lucas, and encourage you to correct any mistakes I make. This is just the beginning of a conversation. This project, even though it's been going on for us for what feels like at times an exceptionally long time, we are just starting in many ways this project. And one of the most important parts of this for us is to have people recognize that there are things that we can do both individually and as a society to start to really address climate change. And that's where we're going to end the evening with those conversations. Did I get that right, Lucas? Tickets are $25 for general admission and $10 for students. It's heavily subsidized, right? We're doing as much as we can to keep this accessible to everybody. We will have a full Bangor Symphony Orchestra there. If you go to the website, thewarmingsea.me, there's a link for tickets on there. It'll take you right to the Collins Center website. And we will flood you with more information about this than you could possibly stand over the next couple of months.
That's fantastic. So I want to open it up for questions from the audience. For those of you that are able, if you want to raise your hand, use the raise hand feature. We'd be happy to unmute you and have you ask your question personally. Otherwise, if you'd like to put it in the chat, please feel free to do so. Rich, Lucas, I think you mentioned this already, but go back and just tell us again about the Greek connection and why the singers are singing that in Greek.
So the legend of the sirens is a Greek legend, and at the very end in the anthem, and I just put the link to the YouTube video in the chat, so you can all click on that and save it and watch it afterwards. The women become they're the mothers, and they're taking care of their children. In the last part of the piece, they sing with the kids, and they say they need to know and give them life, and basically pleading to the community at large, take care of our kids. That transformation happens at the end of the piece, but in the early part of the piece, they are, in fact, the sirens, and I thought, have them be the climate change deniers, sing a song, say the words that all the noise that we keep on hearing that is totally wrong. Don't believe anything you say that you hear. It's no. And I suppose in a way, it's such we don't like to believe anything that is in our own language. So I thought maybe I'll put it in Greek and maybe a little more compelling to match the origin of the sirens. It also sings. It gave a certain weight to the depth of the pronunciation, and informed the rhythm in a way that the English would not have. Because if we say these words in English, they sound insincere. So with the Greek, it was like, okay, we got to listen to this.
Fascinating. So Lucas, you mentioned, the sort of common refrain that is heard throughout the piece. I'm just curious, I'm curious about this whole process. I can't imagine, to me, this would just be completely overwhelming to try to take in all the information that you did and then begin to formulate or translate that into a score. But I'm just curious, was this refrain something that was kind of in your head from the very beginning, or was it just something that you really began to develop as you thought about this more in depth and began to put the pieces together?
When you say the refrain, are you talking about the anthem at the end, or?
No, I was talking about the "Have you told them" section.
Yes, yeah, right.
Truth to hope.
Right. So the truth hope, the way that I often, when you're starting with a blank page,
Yeah, right.
what colors am I using? What who knows what it is.
Right.
So I will take a word or a name and assign pitches to the letters in that word.
Okay.
So with truth hope, as you saw, TRUTHOPE, you saw how I put notes, assigned notes, and that became TRUT. Have you told them? And back to the H. That became the melodic motive that would then run throughout. And whether or not you actually know that, for me, it just becomes the undercurrent that helps give a foundation for the piece. So in fact, the very, very first notes you hear it's a cluster, a chord that rips through, and it is all those notes, TRUTHOPE, together in a bunch.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's disassembled as we go through the piece.
I see. Okay. Fascinating. I can't
Kate's
wait.
going like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that part at all. That was like every time you and I get together, I learn something new. This is fantastic.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I am curious. I mean, this question is sort of for both of you, but obviously going into this, I'm sure you had a sense of what you hoped that you would accomplish or what you wanted to accomplish. What lessons did you learn other than what you just heard now, Kate? But I mean, what surprises? What were the things that maybe really just you didn't anticipate or were just, really surprised to learn throughout this whole process?
You can go ahead first, Lucas.
Well, for me, the dire need for us to do something. I think I hadn't felt it. I didn't realize. I mean, you hear stuff on the news and there's that going on over there and it's that. But the fact is, the world as we know it from year to year is changing drastically. In 10 years, it's going to be completely different. And there are glaciers that are breaking off and going into the ocean, and the sea level will rise 2 feet in a matter of 5 years. I mean, it's going to be astounding. So if I scare you, it's meant to scare you because we have to take action. And the fact is, we will not be able to get back to where it was 50 years ago. It's not coming back. We want to be able to preserve what we have. So we want to be able to stay at this place where we already have crazy hurricanes and tornadoes and fires.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be our norm if we take care of what we have now.
Mm-hmm.
So what I've learned with this whole process is a greater appreciation of what Lucas started with, which is that scientists are, as he put it, really bad at marketing. Before this project, I would never have said I'm a science advocate, even if that's what I was doing. With all of my training and with all of the ways that you're taught to be a scientist, it's take you where the data leads, right? See what it says, learn from the data, go that. And that's all true. But at some point, there's an advocacy aspect to this that becomes critical, whether it's regeneration, whether it's lab work, or whether it's climate change. And I didn't appreciate the level to which I was in a science bubble. I love Lucas's story about the ozone hole because he condensed what was an hour conversation between us as I was explaining the entire part of what? You don't know what the Montreal Protocol is? Everybody knows what the Montreal Protocol is. And of course not, it's a ridiculous thing for me to think, but because that was the world I was in, I just never got outside of that. And I've been in the world of science since my undergraduate days, since I was 18 years old. So I have learned to identify and embrace the idea of advocacy for science, which is different than advocacy for a position, I guess is a good way to put it. And I think that is something that scientists in general need to do more of and be willing to say, I think one of the most important things a scientist can say is, I don't know, here's what I do know, and here's what we need to find out. And I think we have been trained as scientists often, you don't want to say you don't know something. And I think that has to change as well.
Mm-hmm. That's powerful. Very powerful. I would have always called you a science advocate, but that's my naivete.
Thanks, Jerry. I'll take it.
Well, we certainly, need more of that. I mean, as you said, I think it's such a critical piece, and we've certainly seen that over the last, couple of years, how important the scientific perspective is on many, many levels, and the need for scientists to be able to convey what they know in ways that each of us can appreciate and understand. So I think it's it's an incredibly valuable role. And I'm so glad that both of you have taken this project on. I mean, I can't wait to hear it. I'm super excited. I guess one question that I have sort of is, Kate, how in the world did you come up with this idea to begin with?
How did I come up with what? I'm sorry.
Idea. I mean, what spurred this concept?
This particular project?
Putting this to music, like using music as a way to...
So literally from my undergraduate days as a chemistry major, you know, I took a chemistry of the environment class, and we had, you know, for me, there's no surprises in climate science, or, you know, that there's no oh, I can't believe this is happening, because it's all been known. And when Lucas talks about 1938 as this critical point, it's critical because it was the first peer-reviewed paper, but it wasn't the first paper. We've been doing all this really cool research on what we knew, and, you know, what do you know and when did you know it, right? That great line that gets thrown about in politics and everything. And at first I thought the first time was in the 1890s. There was really good hypothetical. If we put this much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, calculations show this is what's going to happen. And that has since been proven. We recently found out, this is a long-winded answer, Jerry, but I'm going to get to it, I promise. We recently discovered, my colleague and I, Miranda Bouchard and I, in 1856, a woman named Eunice Newton Foote, did a lab experiment where she proved it just in the lab that if you increase carbon dioxide, it will increase the heat in the atmosphere. And of course, her work was lost to science, and that's a whole other conversation. That might be my next project, is why on earth we didn't follow what Eunice said. But so why this project? Because with all of that information, we still had people back when Lucas and I were talking about this, arguing about the science. And I honestly just could not stand it anymore. So the next thought was, well, if we're not going to get them with the data, which we have so much of, how are we going to get them? And we're going to get them with art. We're going to at least grab their attention with art. I marvel at artists. I don't know how they do what they do. I don't know how they get inspired. I know if I go to a theater or a musical performance, I feel things in ways that I don't know how to make other people feel. So that is really where it came from. It came from this long-standing partnership of, we should do a project together. We should do a project together. Mm-hmm. And it just hit that this has to be that. So there's no good answer. You know, it's like, I just woke up one day and said, this is it. This is how we have to do it. And Lucas, it like endearingly said, yes. I think the advantage is we had no idea what we were getting into. None. We had no idea how hard this was going to be. We had no idea, you know, how many different threads he would be weaving together. And for me, the easy part was, Lucas, would you do this? I'll let you talk to, well, I'll set up the talk. Like, he's had all the heavy lifting with this. So.
Well, for me, this has become a kind of a passion to use my music in ways that touch people's lives. Just writing a string quartet or whatever, it's lovely, but if there's not something driving the need for it, I a few years ago wrote a piece, a new work, a symphony, a full. I mean, you hear about Beethoven, wrote 9 symphonies and that sort of thing, and a friend was after me for a long time to write Lucas, you need to write a symphony. You've written so much music. And I thought, I can't write a symphony. It takes so much ego to write a symphony, to compel people to sit in a seat and listen to music for 45 minutes. Like I just can't do that. And then it was the centennial of Leonard Bernstein, who had been a mentor to me. And the opportunity came about I thought, okay, you know what, I can write a piece inspired by Bernstein's words. When he wrote a speech, he gave a speech after the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And he said, you know, what can we artists do in the face of violence? This will be our reply to violence, to make music more intensely, more beautifully, more devotedly than ever before. Having known Bernstein, I got special dispensation from the Bernstein family to write this work, Symphony, This Will Be Our Reply. So it's now become a piece that is informed and dramatically portrays intensity, beauty, and devotion, and it's all revolving around the idea of violence, gun violence. And with this work, it is again something that was, it's not just a generic piece for women's chorus, children's chorus, and orchestra. There's a meaning for this, and it's not just, again, about people sitting in a seat and listening to this piece. The most important part of the piece is actually what happens after the piece. Mm. It's what you take away with it and what then happens. I'm going to share the screen one more time just to show in the way that I wrote this melody. Have you told them? Have you told your children the truth? I wrote this in such a way that the range is very small. It does not go beyond that range, so that anybody can sing this melody. It becomes a universal melody. Anybody can sing it. It's not like the Star Spangled Banner, which is 2.5 octaves range. It's something that we all feel and can have and absorb in us. And it becomes hopefully a kind of an earwig that keeps on driving us. Have you told them? Have you told your children the truth? So someone had asked, has this experience changed, and how will you approach, how you will approach your craft in the future? I think that everything that I do, in fact, is going to be informed in this way. I'm embarking on another project, which is a violin concerto about homelessness. Called Paths to Dignity, which will be ready for the 22-23 season. So it's kind of where I'm taking my music, and hopefully can make a change for the better in our world.
I love it. Music with meaning. It's great. Terrific. Fantastic. So I just have one final question for you. I'm curious about the reaction from members of the symphony. What was their what did they say when you shared with them that you wanted to create this piece?
Well, Brian Henricks has been an amazing partner for, as the executive director, he's creative. He's just been so forward thinking and on board right away. And the board as well. That's one of the reasons that I just love this organization, because a lot of orchestras, cultural organizations, are kind of like this, big aircraft carrier, and it just takes so much to move them. And yet, with the Bangor Symphony, we've been able to do things. And you want to do this? Go, boom, do it. And we can keep a pulse on the interests and needs of the community. I will say that the orchestra itself has not yet seen the music, because we rehearse just prior to the concert. So the members of the orchestra, except for the anthem that they recorded, they haven't heard any of this music. So,
I see. I didn't realize.
It will be a bit of discovery once we get into March.
Very cool. Well, we look forward to hearing it. Any final questions from the audience? Just put that out there. I can't thank you enough thank you both so much for just sharing this story with us. To me, it's just really inspirational. I mean, on many levels, for us, for the MDI Biological Lab, as a wonderful example of how thinking creatively about messaging, about how to share the work that you're doing, how to inspire, and really reach folks who may not be familiar with, as Kate said, the data, right? That's where we live in that world. But in reality, we need to bridge that and sort of help others appreciate where that matters. So I'm just really grateful for the work you both are doing. I can't wait to see how this is received by the community, by the world, and we look forward to having you back and you can tell us sort of a retrospective on how it all went. It's terrific. So we look forward to it. Thank you very, very much for being here with us this evening. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.